Hello, Avila macroeconomics students. So I hope everyone survived this crazy week with the coronavirus. We'll see how our nation adjusts. And obviously there are concerns that are applicable to economics, especially with the slowdown in consumer spending. And that's something that you're going to read about today or this week, relative to gross domestic product, national income. So as people cut back on their consumption, which two-thirds of our economy is driven by consumption, there are going to be ripple effects. Now, the question is, how long will this last? If this is just something temporary, it's just a little blip. Think of it as like an extended winter blizzard. Everybody has to shut down for a little bit. But if this goes on for a prolonged period of time, this will impact wages for certain individuals. I think about where I work at MCC Longview, we're still making decisions whether we stay open or not. The nice thing about higher education is we usually get the incomes up front and our revenues, I should say. But there are auxiliary things that are impacted. Think about if Avila were to close for a while for their traditional students, their dining services, auxiliary incomes would significantly be impacted. So uh, right now, businesses and organizations and those that are leaders to be of our country through the Federal Reserve or fiscal policy are having to make tough decisions about how do we make sure that we continue to stimulate spending. So one of the things that may come out soon is that we'll have a kind of like they did in the Bush era, is to just kind of bump up your paycheck by not taking out as much of the Social Security tax. And they did this about, I think it was about 12 years ago or so, might have been 15, that they simply just lowered the rate from 6.2% to 4.2%. So it kind of gave everybody a bump. So they had extra money spent. But of course, that's assuming that people go out and spend that money. So if people are not going out to eat, restaurants, they're not spending as much, it's going to have impacts. And that's what the unknown is right now. So we'll have to just wait and see what happens. Hopefully the coronavirus will be contained and we can go back to somewhat normality. Overall, the economic fundamentals were very strong, only 3 weeks ago. We had an all-time high in the market. You saw the craziness this past week in the stock market. Bumped back up on Friday, which was good news. So kind of a little bit more reassurance from our executive leaders that we're going to do something about this and try to prevent going into a potential recession. So a recession by definition is 2 quarters of negative growth in GDP, and that's something that you read about this week. So let's go over a little bit about week 3. You're going to read chapters 7 and 8. Continue with the forum discussion. Make sure to jump in there early. And significant post appears, at least 3 of those. So get your initial post in by Thursday. You can do this all earlier in the week if you wish, because you do have a written assignment this week. So I want to ask you to analyze a economic variable out of an article. You can use multiple sources for this, textbook, go to websites such as maybe the Bureau of Labor Statistics, other ones that explain the variables. Investopedia might be a good one. But again, I'm just looking for a 2-page double-spaced written paper. Do use APA format, so that means use in-text citations when you're referencing to the author or the source, and make sure to use a references page. Visit Purdue OWL. I'm okay with APA 6th edition or 7th edition. 6th edition, I think I'm fine with that. I think it's easier to work with right now. A lot of universities are trying to figure out how to transition to the new versions of APA 7th edition, but the main thing is I want you to do is just cite your sources and have a reference page for those sources and make sure they're in the right formats. So with that, you're also going to do the My Econ lab, so continue to plug away at that. Again, earlier better. Don't wait till the Sunday to do this, especially this week is a busier week. And then I hope to have everything graded by Tuesday from week 2. So we're already 1/4 the way done with these courses. So these courses go quickly, so just make sure you stay on top of things and you'll do well. All right, look at some of the topics this week. First, you're going to look at the concept of unemployment. And unemployment, for the most part, has been at historically lows. We'd have what you'd call zero cyclical unemployment. Now that's probably going to change here with the coronavirus, where you would only have some what is called frictional and structural. Frictional would be like, let's say that after I got my doctorate done, I moved to Texas and got a job down there. My wife currently works for a school district, if she hopefully would come along with me, that she'd be frictionally unemployed for a while until she could find another job. Or as people graduate from college or high school, they're students, now they're frictionally unemployed until they can find work. Structural unemployment actually deals with changes in the structure for goods and services, how we produce, and the demand for these goods and services. A common example is, that we used to do things on a assembly line when we made cars. They had welders, but now it's all robots that do all the work. So you used to be one of those welders, you are now structurally unemployed. Other factors too, just how we do things. When I go to Walmart or anything like that, they don't have cashiers anymore. It's all up to you to check it yourself out. And you swipe the thing 10 times and the technology says that you didn't swipe properly, so you get frustrated. And you keep repeating the process. But they've learned that they could save money by not having to pay for workers. So it's just a more efficient way for them to reduce the cost. And also people getting their groceries delivered, or they're getting the shoppers are around in those big carts that you can't get around in the aisles. So there are changes. So if you used to do that particular type of work, unless you retool your skills, you may be structurally unemployed. All right, so a little bit to what you're going to read about that chapter is about the idea of inflation. And inflation is one of those things that it can actually be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing. We want some rate of inflation in the economy. Now, inflation is probably going to definitely stay in check a little bit here, that our economy potentially could be slowing. I mean, the Federal Reserve is trying to pump in a bunch of money. There's a fiscal policy. But simply, if people aren't buying goods and services, and I think oil prices are down quite a bit, deflation could actually be bad for the economy. But some moderate level of inflation, historically in the United States, we've had about 3% inflation, probably 2% in more recent years. But uncontrolled inflation can have wealth effects, and that's what we're concerned about. And then we'll learn more about the Federal Reserve later and how they try to juggle those balls of gross domestic product, unemployment, inflation. But the main thing I want you to think about with inflation, and a great website to go to, if I remember, I'll put it out there, is the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, because they actually have an inflation calculator, which is kind of fun. So you can go and you can compare an item. Say you saw E.T. back in the early 80s and the price of a movie ticket was this much. And if it stayed with the rate of inflation, this is what the price of a movie ticket should be today. But we know that movies are much more expensive today, but there's other factors why they're more expensive too. So, but it's kind of fun to look at it. But they give a good explanation of how CPI is calculated with the price index. But basically, I want you to think of that. Think of it as a basket of goods. If we had hot dogs and Cokes, and that's all we produced, and the hot dog was $1 and the Coke was $1, and the next year that the hot dog went to $1.25 and the Coke went to $1.50, well, we're just looking at that change in prices. So, and obviously you've got to hope that your wages go up with those increases in prices, or otherwise in real terms you're worse off. And there's something called the Fisher equation, which takes 1 plus the nominal rate divided by 1 plus the inflation rate. And basically, if your wages go up exactly the rate of inflation, you're not better off or worse off. So you're just staying pace. But if your wages don't go up as much as the inflation rate, your real purchasing power has decreased. Last part of that chapter has talked a little bit about the business cycle. So, we've kind of been running this high trough, and now the question is, are we at a turn now? Could the coronavirus kind of push us towards a recession? But the federal government and the fiscal side and the Federal Reserve, the monetary side, is going to try to do everything within their powers to try to prevent a recession or a severe recession. So we hope that doesn't happen, but a lot of this just depends on the coronavirus and how long people have to stay inside and or can't go out and don't spend money. So there's not a lot you can do about that. And if that does happen, that's probably going to cause some what we call cyclical unemployment go up. So we got to figure out ways to continue to encourage people to spend money. So it might be alternative ways that they go out and spend these monies. But it doesn't mean that certain businesses aren't going to be impacted in the short run. It's kind of, can they survive in the long run to get enough cash flow to come in? And I think it's where a lot of states right now are trying to work with the businesses. But if you look like something like the airline industry or the cruise industry, they are just taking massive hits. And if we look at it from a microeconomic side, for some of them, it's going to probably mean bankruptcy filing or a shutdown point that they can't offer services to certain areas anymore. You've already seen that they're trying to do preventive action, but that also means some of their employees are going to have to be laid off potentially because of cyclical unemployment, because there's just not a demand for those goods or services. Last chapter, chapter 8, to wrap up, you're going to look at gross domestic product. I really encourage you to look at the details on page 176 because the authors give a nice explanation of GDP from an aggregate expenditures account, where you look at consumption plus investment plus government expenditures plus net exports. Investment is much different from an economist perspective than buying stocks and bonds. Investment is businesses going out and building new buildings like Amazon, or Warren Buffett with locally here with his choo-choo tracks out in there in Gardner, Edgerton. You buying a house. So it's not buying stocks and bonds. It's investment in production of future goods and services. The government is a big expenditure of goods and services from the federal, state, and local level. Obviously, they have to bring in taxes or borrow money to do those expenditures. And that's probably what we're going to see a little bit of a shift in now with our economy, is you're probably going to see a lot more of the federal expenditures to try to keep GDP on pace. So they want to encourage people to continue to spend, because they know that the consequences are that if you stop spending, that's going to mean higher unemployment rates, which is not good for anyone, because that means that your standard of living declines. But they're also going to look at the national income approach for that one. And the chapter kind of wraps up kind of saying with GDP per person. And one thing about GDP, it doesn't necessarily reflect on who gets all this income. The distributions in the United States are still very skewed. You look at income. If we had 20 people in the room, it's saying like 2 people get half that income in the room and the rest get everything else. So, and if you look at net worth or wealth, like Jeff Bezos or the Bill Gates, it is so disproportionate. And that's one of the criticisms of maybe our system is, the trade-off is that we are the greatest economy in the world. Most economists probably argue that's much better than other places, so we'll live with this sacrifice that certain individuals get more income than others, but it still begs the question of equality, what is fair. So that's where politics are going to come into play in the next election. So, all right, well, continue to post in the forum discussions. I've enjoyed the readings. Like this week, I'll kind of jump in once in a while. But if you do have any questions, do send me an email, or I will talk to you soon. Take care.